right, we'll see if he can find us or not. In the meantime, we will call the meeting to order, and I will introduce our planning commission. On my far right, we have a new member. We'll hear a little bit more about him later, John Peterson. Next to John, we have Bob Hankey, and I'm Shelley Nazer. We have Julie Martin, Bob Washburn, and Joe Chambers with us today. And we will go ahead and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the United States of the Republic.
Okay, item number 1 on our agenda is the approval of minutes. Does anyone have any comments or improvements that they'd like made to the minutes?
So we do have
This item on the agenda is the oath of office for John Peterson. We'll invite Ty to help us with that.
Thank you. I'm reading right on pen. Do you solemnly swear that you will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this state, and that you will discharge the duties of your office with fidelity?
Yes.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the approval of minutes. Did anyone find any concerns with the minutes?
No, I just had a couple questions on line 27. 141, 91, and 130, where it has the absent locations. On 130, my name is missing, and I don't know if we needed to list everybody that was actually absent on each of those lines. Is that something that needs to happen?
Yeah, I'll have that.
Okay, I just want to make sure that was the only thing I saw.
I have one item on line 114. I think AI had a little unfortunate selection of words there. We talked about the terms being related directly to an ordinance or category. So it says it should be explicitly linked to their respective categories. I'd just like to change that to directly rather than explicit. If we can, please.
Okay, any other comments on the minutes? I'll call for a motion.
A motion we accept the minutes with the one change there. Oh, and then, that's right. And the change with those that were absent.
Thank you. First, do I have a second?
Second.
Bob Washburn for second. All right. Let's take a vote. All in favor? Any opposed? The motion carries. Now it's time for our public comment section. This is where citizens may express their views on issues with the Planning Commission's jurisdiction. We do accept comments in person, by email, and by text. We do ask that anyone in the audience may make comments that do not pertain to an agenda item. We'll save that for later. Do we have any general public comments tonight? Anything by text or email?
I didn't see anything.
Okay, we will go ahead and close the public comments and move on to our public hearing. Tonight, we will take comments and questions regarding a proposal to amend PCC 1-3-2 definitions and PCC 10-6-1, the use chart. have anyone that would like to speak on this item? Okay, if you'll just get up and say your name and city of residence.
John and others. That I don't know if this is supposed to be. I just feel like there's a little overreach. I feel like the federal government's taking away rights they don't constitutionally have. I feel like the state is. And I felt like from some of the things that have been proposed, there's maybe some overstepping, infringing upon the citizens' rights. I don't have the picture that you do, and so I'm not here to be angry or cause any anger. Need more clarification, but one thing that concerned me is just little things. I mean, we grew up, our country was made great on a free enterprise system. And I don't think there's probably 10 in 100 people that can define that. Free enterprise is an economic system in which private business operates in competition, largely free of state control. I think the states and municipalities are just reaching out, gaining more control over everything we do, including landscaping my yard. Some of the things that are proposed, I would have to get a rezone and a building permit, if I understood it right, with a waterfall in my yard. I just think that's just extra taxes. I get no service from the building permit. I'll have to hire an engineer and licensed people to do that, pay them, and then I have to pay the city a building permit, and they do nothing but sit down, drink a cup of coffee, and go approved or not approved. I don't know if they drink coffee or not, but I just, I'm a little concerned that some of the things that we had, I came today and got her assistance and had this printed out, and an awful lot of red stuff in here changes. And a lot of it I can't even understand because it's in political code. So I'm just, I guess I'd ask the question. I'm not a young man anymore. I live on Edge Hill Drive, which the name of the road tells you where I live. I live on the edge of the hill. And I have a very steep driveway the next couple of years. I want to be able to put a garage in that's group level so I don't have to snowball a very steep driveway all the way along. And I'll have to hire engineers and architects to lay that out. And I have to come to the city and pay them an extra amount to just say, yes, that plan works. We get service out of the city and we just take money for the plan. To build from it is. The other one that concerned me is, I may be misreading this one completely, but it said on estate sales, that would be looked at as a small business. Now, I don't know if any of you had your parents die, you have to settle an estate, but we've been trying to settle our family estate for 2 years. We've had to pay attorneys, we've had to pay surveyors, we have to pay a city to come in just because we're selling stuff. So I'm just concerned that we're maybe reaching out more than we should. I'm open to any education you can give me.
We certainly appreciate you being
I'm not really proud of it.
No, but we appreciate all of the comments and all the assistance that we can get. Really, we're just planning commission and we're up here to make recommendations to the city council. There are some things that we get to see through. Tonight, we're just making a recommendation to the city council. And we wanted to hear your voice. That's why we're having this hearing here tonight. So we are open to suggesting any changes to the planning commission. We can certainly alter this document, and we'd be happy to continue to listen to your comments. And I would encourage you to also go to the planning commission meeting if you can. Council, thank you. I'm just up here. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to?
Well, I have a question, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot for this, but could you give us a specific reference in what you were looking at, that you drew those two conclusions about the,
Well, in building code 911, it says the purpose is of this chapters provide minimum standards of safeguard to life, human health and property and public welfare. And I can't see how putting a little teeny waterfall in my yard is gonna affect any of that.
where,
And
where are you referencing the waterfall from directly as needing to be? You might, let me,
Well,
I mean,
okay, it's in,
what we're wasting time.
it's an
Did you read it
accessories.
correctly, or is that not the intent of it, Scarlett?
Can I come up and look at your paper?
Sure. If that part comes under 10.2.12.2 accessory buildings and structures. And it says pool, screening and decking, waterfalls, fountains, barbecue pits, concrete foundations and decorative ponds or sports courts generally require zoning clearance and building permits.
They're not in tonight's discussion. These were in previous, when we did the accessory buildings and the accessory structures. It depends, honestly, some of the city does do zoning clearance. And we have a lot of neighbors that wanna make sure that their neighbor is putting their stuff in the right place. So the city doesn't really, the city would actually prefer not to have to go out and measure how far away from every property line everything is. But because neighbors wanna make sure that everyone is doing things right, we do that.
You say right, let me just make sure that I'm, what you mean by.
According to the code, yes, according to the setbacks. Yep, that they're putting them in the place that our code says. And so that's why we have to do the zoning clearances, to make sure that if our city code says that a structure has to be 10 feet off of the property line, then we need to have them show us a diagram that shows that they have room with that structure on their property and still be 10 feet off the property line. That's what the zoning clearance does. The
It also
building,
keeps it away from sensitive areas that are certain areas that are potentially known, by the county, parcel viewer, some is listed there, but that's a combination of data. But we can help, and I think some misunderstanding is help of, if we have a zoning clearance and we know that there's a fault line, and you apply to build a house on top of the fault line, you may not know that it's there. Your builder isn't designed to do there. So who gives you that information to say, hey, you know what, you need to watch out for a fault line. Your builder's not gonna do that, your engineer's not gonna do that. But the city can identify and tell you, hey, at this point, there has been identified hazards or sensitive areas on this piece of property. You will need to make sure that you will let the builder, the engineer, whatever, you let them know, and we just want confirmation that you've let them know and are aware of these sensitive areas. And that is actually a help. A building permit, having gone through one this last year on my own remodel of my basement, at that point, a building permit is actually very helpful. So let's say you have electricity you want to take into that little shed you have so that you can have lights in it. And have a garage door that opens automatically. Having an electrician be able to install it, but having a third party review it and make sure that that electrician followed the code, it is a great help, because not only for you, but for the person you sell that building or sell that lot to, you now have a third party that has reviewed the work. Technically, you can do the work on your own as if you're an electrician, that the law allows you to perform some of that work on your own. But having that stamp of a third party actually gives you a lot of ability, so that when you go to sell your house, and likewise when you go to buy a house, you want to know that that's been done to city code or state code or building code, and you get an assurance of that it's been done that way. So arguably, the zoning clearance gives you the ability of known hazards that you may not know, and a building permit gives you a third-party review, not to restrict you, but to give that third-party review, so that when you sell the house, you know that it's been constructed to a proper standard, And that you don't necessarily get from either your contractor or your engineer. There's a lot of value you actually receive from that. And if I'm buying your house and you haven't gone through that, how do I know? I'm not licensed to inspect it. But to have a third party that takes care of that between us, that's why we have appraisers. That's why we have lots of third party transactions in between interested parties, between one owner of a house and another.
I'm gonna live there till I die, so my kids will have to sell it. Thank you.
But both of those are based on public safety. They're based on making sure that structures are put far enough away that they don't create a hazard unknowingly. And that they are built to the standard so that they don't fall down and hurt somebody. So that's what it's for. It's a public safety, it's a protection. So not just for us to shuffle.
Another one on your waterfall, that's a great point to, why would you need one? What if your neighbor put in a waterfall upstream from you? We know that there's a liquefaction problem in a certain area or a water spring problem in a certain area. They put it up ahead of you and now it floods your basement. No, an issue, not a building issue, not a construction issue, but at that point, if you haven't put in the proper retainage of that, maybe a cement, maybe whatever that is to maintain that water, if you're putting that in, you may have just deteriorated the neighbor next to you. You didn't necessarily know, but a centralized information of housing of that information can certainly help you in that process. And that's the goal, not the money. The money only is cost of what it takes to have the inspector. So it's finish your basement, it was a $25 building inspection. To have a third party make sure that everything was done right. I'm gonna say, yeah, that was definitely worth it.
And no, you wouldn't need a zoning change. You would just need a zoning clearance that says that we looked at the rules for your particular zone and you're putting that structure within those rules. So that's what that is. But tonight they're talking about different uses. That's a very important part of our code, but that's what they talked about a couple of weeks ago when they passed the accessory building and structures ordinance. That's what we're looking at right there.
Okay.
We did also have a question about the estate sale. The definition says that an estate sale is considered a temporary business facility and shall comply with requirements for a home business. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, I guess there are different people have different envisions of estate sales. But the estate sales that I think our code is anticipating are sales where people come, they actually register to bid on the items. It's not just not a yard sale or a garage sale. It's a mechanism to liquidate that whole estate. Generally not the house, but generally everything within that. And it's usually done more like a bidding type thing.
Like an outside party could
With a
bid
third
for
party.
places.
With a third party managing. And so oftentimes there's a tremendous amount of cars at a yard sale too, but a lot of times they come and go and come and go. And in a estate sale, there's a lot of times when you go and then you've got to sit and wait for that item that you're interested in to come up. So they are just a little bit, I don't think we're used to seeing estate sales in our area very much. We had one down on my grandfather's property several years ago and they had lots of people there. It was a big deal, but I've gone to several in Idaho and it is like actually going to an auction. So if they're going to go to that magnitude for their sale, we just want to make sure that they've got parking and stuff so that they're not parking on the neighbors' lawns, that they're making sure they have enough room to accommodate what they're gonna accomplish with their sale.
And I don't believe this is something that is designed for selling it on, in a case of classified by the kids.
No,
So this isn't the kids trying to sell, a few things here and there, in case of classified. This is having an auctioneer come in and an organized auction event, or a state sale event.
They usually bring additional stuff in that they want to sell at the auction.
They can, and so this is actually, yeah, I mean, they'll bring it in and say, hey, here is what it is, and they bid it out. It's kind of like a special event permit, or it's something that says here for this period of time, they're going to have an impact, and we want to know and help mitigate that impact. If it's a huge estate, let's take when Stan passed away. If they were to do it, when Stan Checketts passed away, when they did that, if they were to do an entire estate sale auction, there could be a large gathering of individuals, and we have safety regulations that if the gathering is over 1,000 people, then we need the health department. If it's over a certain number of people, we want police to be able to manage traffic. If we want to help manage what happens so that they can be successful in business. So we don't want to be in the way of the business venture. We want to be helpful that says, hey, if this is going to cause an undue hazard, how can we help mitigate? And so those officers, they will be charged for, if it's certain the health department doesn't charge for their effort there, but if it's a big enough event, they want to be present. And so I think that's kind of what some of these are, is to try to help and say, hey, we're wanting to help so that happens, rather than say, oh, you can't do it. It just says, how can we make sure that that's done so it doesn't harm your neighbors? Or at least maybe we say, hey, you need to notify your neighbors in a 300-foot radius or something. That's why some of these things come up, is because the neighbor wants to know, and we need to help them to understand and be able to get into their house and out. It's safety, a lot of times it's safety ones.
and it's not the part of settling the estate that you take care of with your trustee and your attorney and that we don't get involved in at all. This is just the part that if you're going to do a public sale and have it organized with a third party and go through all that, that's the estate sale we're talking about. We're not talking about the settlement of the estate where you work through a trust and have it divvied out, not sold to general public, but distributed the way the will or the trust says. That's a whole different thing.
I think there is a little bit of overlap in gray area, because if you talk about a yard sale, it's kind of odds and ends and toys and clothes. I have left many houses and called my garage sale an estate sale because I wanted people to know there was going to be furniture and big items, and it generally attracts more people. Am I selling my entire estate? I don't have much of an estate, but just bigger items. And I think, if there's somebody who has more that they're selling, they're probably calling it an estate sale, but they might not necessarily be having an auction. I think there's just a lot of gray area. And I did see for a time there was advertisement of estate sales in Providence that was more like a pop-up shop.
They're in Main Street, they're pallet.
Yeah, pallet. So to
pallet
me,
estate.
that's where I think we should be having more interference with that, or at least, making sure things are done correctly, and maybe calling that pop-up shops. And pop-up shops would need to get the city's approval. But an estate sale is somebody who's, like a business license or a temporary business license that, and I don't know what your situation is, Mr. John, but selling family estate, that could just be selling off lots of big items that could take a couple of years to sell off. And so would they need to maintain a business license for that?
No, that's not what, that's selling part of an estate, but there is such a thing as an estate sale that is very organized and very, very much done right in the middle of the residential area where that house and that estate is. And that's what we're talking about. It may be that maybe there's terms that are being used differently than, but this is the one where, well, in fact, we had one not too long ago with the Baker's property. They had it advertised, they had a plethora of cars there, and I'm pretty sure they had a third party that helped them with that. So there are, yes,
So.
Yeah, but it's still
it
just
sounds
selling
like-
their personal property, would we need to tax them on that? Like that seems.
This isn't a tax one.
No.
Not into the.
This isn't about taxing.
On their sales tax.
no,
Well, that's a different item. This is the definition and having it as a temporary business, so they would have the need to follow a kind of a temporary business license. If this definition, it's a great thing to do, but this definition right here, it's under the purview we're talking about. If that's the wrong name,
Yeah.
and we should use a different name to
Mhm.
better define, this is a great discussion to be able to say, hey, this is actually, we don't call these estate sales anymore. We call them, to pop up, I hadn't heard it called that, but if that's what the term is, then
Then you need
we could define and say, oh, well, maybe this isn't a estate sale, maybe this is a pop-up and an auction or whatever that is. That would certainly be good to say, hey, let's define this better, so that when we have those items that are a large effect, that we're looking to say, hey, how can we make sure that this is done effectively and it doesn't negatively
Yeah,
affect
you're
neighbors.
absolutely right.
Let's figure out that definition and what is that?
Closing on everybody's estate sale, that seems like an overreach a little bit to me. But calling it a pop-up or an auction or an estate auction, maybe we could define it more concisely so that it's has more clarity.
That was a real concern of mine.
Okay.
But I'm glad I could give you something else to discuss. with.
Let me.
But Joe, if Joe wants to say
I guess
something.
my concern is just teach me, tell me when it's time for me to start putting that garage on. And that little waterfall, if it's on a river, it'll just be water I recirculate. Who do I talk to and when do how far in advance do I need to start those proceedings?
If it has a zoning clearance, then you can start with Scarlett's department and come in and just make sure they have pre-meetings and they can go through just answering questions. And lots of times people will go through that and say, oh yeah, you probably don't need to have another step. They have some pre-discussion ones like that. And we're here to make sure that you're helped in that manner. Come in as soon as you know that's what you want to do. Come in, visit with us, and we'll see and say, hey, here's the things you may want to consider. And if it's like a shed, if it's not over a certain size, it doesn't need a building permit, right? It's only over a certain size that requires a building permit. And you say, oh, hell, this is my building, do I need a building permit? Oh, that's under the size and scope. That doesn't need one, and you're welcome to put it. Just remember, you need to be at least a little bit of distance away from your neighbors so that your water doesn't flow onto them. And then you say, okay, good go.
Thank
So
you, Ryan. I think Joe had something he wanted to say.
Well, I just think you need to focus on the definitions of a yard sale and an estate sale. Because in my mind, I see two circles, the old Venn diagram that you learned in math. And there may be some small, but I don't see an overlap at all. I think they're mutually exclusive definitions. The yard sale, if you call a yard sale an estate sale, it doesn't make it an estate sale. It's still a yard sale by definition. And if you want to call it a estate sale to attract people, but it meets the definition of a yard sale, you got a yard sale. You're selling the entire contents of the house, and you don't reside in that any longer, and it's for the season, then it's an estate sale. And if you call it a yard sale, it's still an estate sale, it's an estate sale. So I think, I looked at the two definitions, I'm okay with it. But just so you know, Mr. Brown, I can't speak for every planning commission member, but I know my background is very property rights oriented. And I look at the line of where government should get involved and should involve. That line pretty philosophical. Most.
Thank you very much.
John, did you have something for us?
It follows the lines of clarification or change the term, define it so that everyone understands.
Rob, did you have something you wanted to say, Mr. Shaw? Okay, if we don't have any further comments, anybody else? Do you have anything else you'd like us to?
Oh, I just was a little concerned about that. I want to make sure I'm not going to jail.
Well, we really do appreciate you being here, and the staff is very approachable and very helpful. You can always give us a call or stop by the office here. You can also send an email, even a text if you'd like, and it will get to us if you address it with that information. Thank you so much.
I should go back to your meeting.
You sure can if you'd like, or you're welcome to stay as well. Okay, thank you. All right. With that, we will close our public hearing. And that takes us to our legislative action item, which is where we will review, discuss, and make a recommendation to the City Council regarding the proposal to amend PCC 132 definitions and PCC 1061, the use chart. That is the item that we just had our public hearing on. So now we can discuss any further if there are any additional changes we would like to make, anything else we'd like to address, if we want to move it back to a study item to complete the process. I will open it up to the commission for discussion.
Sounds like we should decide what an estate sale is. Definition maybe.
So I would actually, Joe is right. If I would just direct your attention to the yard sale definition. It is on line 64, and it reads a yard, garage, or a yard sale or garage sale on an occasional basis means an informal event for the sale of used goods by private individuals that reside at the property. Events are held infrequently, no more than 4 times per year, and irregularly, and cannot exceed 3 consecutive days. So that helps clarify a little bit, right? Kind of helps distinguish the difference between the two. Maybe we could add some clarification. Third party.
Why don't you read the definition of the state?
Yeah, let's do that.
It's on line 29.
Thank you. Line 29, estate sale auction means a sale designed to sell all or nearly all of the contents of a home or the sale of a property owner's entire estate. An estate sale is considered a temporary business facility and shall comply with the requirements for a home business.
I mean, again, being in the military, I've almost sold the entire contents of my home before moving. Would that require somebody like that to do that?
I think one defining characteristic, the difference is in the yard sale, it says that you live there. So if you reside there, then it could certainly fall under a yard sale. Would you agree with that?
I do. I don't. And if that's not what the staff intended, then it does need to be clarified. But to me, it's very clear that an estate sale or auction doesn't involve a person who's living at the home.
It doesn't really say that though.
Or the sale of the property owner's entire estate.
Yeah, but it doesn't say you're living there or not.
Under the estate, so it doesn't say that under the
Right.
yard, so.
Right.
Do we need some clarification to the estate sale? Do we have any suggestions on how we could further clarify the difference?
For the true estate sales that do not have a third party doing the auction or the selling. My understanding is generally somebody, a third party that actually you hire to do. but I don't know enough about it. I know that my mother-in-law passed away in February and we talked about having a estate sale. And, we were gonna hire somebody to do it, but we've just decided to give stuff away and sell it ourselves, and now we're the yard sale. Now I do have a yard sale. Now you can, my sister-in-law puts everything on Facebook or whatever and just sells it or gives it away, so I'm wondering if, I guess my question is, does an estate sale require a third party? Because if it doesn't, I think we just say a third party somewhere in there.
Well, isn't the point that we're trying to protect the public, the neighbors from this massive vehicles and stuff? So whether it's an estate sale or whatever, it doesn't really matter if there's a third party involved. What matters is what's gonna happen. Are we gonna have a big influx of people that is gonna cause some traffic problems, or isn't that the issue? What's the real issue?
Yeah, I guess it's almost that we're predicting whether or not it's gonna be a large volume of people. So we assume that there's going to be more to the estate sale than
Because
there
maybe
would
they don't have a estate sale, maybe they have a big festival.
And we should have, we have other things in the definition that would cover a festival,
Especially then,
right?
yes.
Okay.
But yeah, but it's kind of like Julie was saying, you might label a sign estate sale, so you get more traffic, but it's actually a yard sale.
Where's the ordinance for home business? What's, because that's what, this is directing us to. And it should tell us, something about parking and, if you're doing a home business, there are some restrictions about parking and traffic and that type of thing, right? So,
Title 3. I think it's Title
-4, I
Four.
believe.
Mhm.
And I just see one, there's only 2 notes of home business there's one in the use chart. It's not defined in the definitions.
It's not defined in these definitions, but it
Yeah.
is defined in our
In the
definition.
code.
In the code.
Is this not the definition section of the code?
It is,
It is.
It's not the entire.
it's not the entire dictionary.
Oh, I see.
If you go to 1-3-2, you get the correct definition.
the code for,
Base business,
for a home-based business. Where did you say that? Where did I find it on? So,
Title 3,
title,
Here it is.
there we go, business, there we go. 3, what?
4.
4, business types. Okay, thanks.
Would you like me to go over that for the record?
I don't know if we have to read through the whole thing, I just wanted to see what it covers here. Because I mean, it points us to the home business here under state sales. Right?
Well, that is a little interesting though. Correct me if I'm wrong. It says a home business owner must be a resident of the primary dwelling. But under estate sales, it says that you're not a resident.
yes, doesn't actually say you're not,
that's
it
under
just
the
doesn't,
yard.
Doesn't address,
it's silent on that.
We could take the reference to the home business out and just have it be an estate sale. We do have temporary business facility in Title 10, Chapter 8, I think it is. Title 10, Chapter 8. I wanna say maybe it's Section 7. I'm not sure, I'll look it up really quick. But talks of, and it might be less confusing if we just take the reference to home business out and just treat it solely with the temporary business facility. Cause that's the one that talks about how they have to prepare for parking and they may need to have restrooms depending on different things, so.
I think that sounds like a great change. Rather than a home business, a
Yeah.
temporary business.
Just take that home business thing out and just let it refer to the temper groups.
That's better.
Yeah, let's do that, Scarlett. Could you add that, change?
They can make that change.
Okay. I think we've covered estate sales and yard sales enough. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to say about
I
that?
just wanna ask
Yeah, yeah.
one more for this. When somebody applies for that, are they having to apply for like a federal EIN? Do they have to, what's their tax requirements for sales tax?
Generally, if they're using a third party, they take care of all of that type of thing, and if they're just doing the garage sale thing, we don't get involved in that.
Okay, then that's,
If the state people wanna come by and tell someone they're selling too often and they need to get a business license, then, which I don't think it's happened in Providence, but that has happened on occasion, when people have felt like it wasn't just a random yard sale, it was a constant business, then the state may ask them to do that, but we have not got into that point. So,
thank you.
Julie, just let us know when your next yard sale's happening. I would like an invitation.
And anymore.
Okay.
Get rid of me.
Do we have, any further discussion on the definitions or the use chart? Any other questions or suggestions for changes?
I just have a general question about pallet sale. It just defines what a pallet sale is here, but is that dealt with under, the temporary business? Because the pallet sale happens every other weekend or something. Around here, there's a sign going up. I haven't ever been there, but,
I think we should go. We should have
we
this.
should go.
Yeah, I
Check
think
it out.
you and I should go
Check
to
it
check
out.
that and check it out either.
Bring a trailer.
You bring yours, we'll see what
It defines it, so we must have it addressed somewhere in the code.
Can you tell us about those pallet sales and if they've had any?
we haven't had to, I mean, the only places that have advertised pallet sales, to my knowledge, within Providence are already a business. Like, I don't think Palmer's did it, but it seems like the furniture store that was maybe there before Palmer's was in between Edwards and seems like they had some sales now and again. The one up on Main Street, they do that, but they already have a business license to be doing business. I don't know of anybody, and I mean, when we've had growers that have come in and so they come in under a seasonal permit, and so that's different as well. So we have not had anybody that has done a pallet sale as a separate business. Everything we've seen so far has been within a permanent businesses under their umbrella.
Okay.
So,
at this point, pallet sale is not used currently in the code. It's being added in the definition and it's being added in the use chart to be specified where a pallet sale might occur.
and it's in the commercial zones.
And so, yeah, so we're showing that in the commercial, the mixed commercial or commercial areas, that we're adding a use, because that's the thing, is we go through the uses and say, hey, where can these be done? And there are some pallet sales that happen, and I think I've seen the same kind of advertisement you have. It says, where should those occur? If they occur, that's what they're calling it. If they occur, where should they occur? And what we're doing is we're adding that small definition so we can add it into the use chart and say it's allowed in commercial areas.
Okay.
And that's the change that's happening. It's not used anywhere else.
That defines what, that answers my question. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Bob. You have anything else for us?
Nope.
Okay, anybody else, any further comments, questions, suggestions on these two items? All right, great. I will entertain a motion. Don't all speak at once.
So, you did this for all of them, and you said item.
Yeah, item number 3 covers PCC 132 and PCC 1061.
Yes, I did.
Okay, absolutely.
Bed and breakfast residential. The very end it says, and is occupied by the owner. So you couldn't have a home that's not occupied by the owner. That's oh, bed and breakfast residential. That's clarified.
I think so. Yeah, we also have some. We've had some discussion about short-term rentals as well. And so that's why at the end of that one it says also known as a short-term rental.
So short-term rentals don't have to be occupied by the owner.
Yeah, that's correct, right?
At
Right
this
now.
point, there is the discussion with potential adding another definition for short-term rental, or adding another code to further regulate that on a short-term rental, which is a balance. If we add more regulation to that, that's to be his point, right? I mean,
Totally.
so there's that balance, but at this point, as defined in the code, the bed and breakfast, that's where we've used that, and we're just matching that up. So yeah, that currently that's accurate. We don't have something that further regulates short-term rentals beyond the short-term rentals that are owner occupied.
And did you say that is a discussion with city council right now?
It had a study item there.
They have not brought it back, but they did have it as a study item. They're knocking down, they've had to do budget and a few things, and they're taking them kind of one step at a time. And the next step, I think they're gonna consider micro schools and home-based micro schools and micro education entities. And then they may consider short-term rentals after that. We do have another definition. It's not listed on this page because we're not changing anything about it, but it's bed and breakfast in, and you could do that. Operate a bed and breakfast. Hire a manager, not have somebody inside. But bed and breakfast residential, that's our version of short-term rental, and that's our favorite part. Doesn't mean the person has to be there while that person's staying there. This means that has to be the person's primary residence that they come and go from. And then, I had someone talking to me today about the client she has looking for a home, and the client is a traveling nurse. So this would be her primary residence, but when she's called to go work somewhere else for 2 or 3 months, then she would like to be able to perhaps short-term rental her home, which would work just fine. So she doesn't have to be there, but she does have to ultimately be on.
So, just for your benefit, maybe to remind everybody, when we first brought this up, I asked about the situation. My brother-in-law had been out visiting in Idaho, and they stayed in an Airbnb, which was basically a townhome that somebody was doing, a short-term rental. They weren't living there, never lived there, don't plan to live there, and it seemed like a good concept. He liked it. Takes business away from hotels probably, and I, you know, taxes, I understand if you run through Airbnb, they get all handled appropriately. But, we can't do that in Providence, and so I brought it up as something, I wanted to see what everybody else thought about that kind of thing. I'm kind of okay either way, but I think everybody else felt like having owner occupancy increases the safety and neighborhood view of the property. So that we have had some discussion about that, and I just kind of gave up on it.
Take it to the city council. Just kidding.
And that question is, how much more do you want to further regulate that industry and how do you want to put it in that?
But you're regulating it now, like not. So.
It's that, right? And it's happening. I mean, we've had citizens come and talk to us about knowing numerous people that do that on a regular basis in town.
Yeah, sure.
So we don't
So what's
regulate
the,
it
yeah,
right now. So
yeah, so I did say you're regulating. You're just not.
you're regulating by not taking action.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my piece.
So Scarlett, is this topic, is this within our purview and within our jurisdiction to make amendments or suggest changes to the code for short-term rentals? Is that something the planning commission may appreciate?
I think it depends, Scarlett,
I think right now we need to stick with the definitions, and if you want to change the way the bed and breakfast residential definition is written, but the whole short-term rental, their actual regulations, they're going to that's under the business license code. And so, because it does talk about sales tax and owner responsibility and things like that under a business license. We are looking at the use of that building, that structure for zoning compliance. And the other one is looking at it from a business operation compliance. So I think you could, if you wanted to recommend that they not be, owner occupied, you could certainly have that discussion as part of that bed and breakfast definition. But I don't think it would be within your realm to talk about the actual business licensing regulations.
I think we would just,
You know, that raises an interesting question. Because I have a neighbor who has more than 3 dogs. And that is a land use issue. But if you look it up in the city code, it's under enforcement with the police under 5.
Do they have a kennel permit?
I'm sure they do, but that's $150 plus the licensing for the dogs. But none of the neighbors were ever notified that it was going to happen. And it doesn't limit it to 3, they can have 12 dollars, they can have 20. They have a third of an acre. And so, you know, I don't know that having something in the police code enforcement that really is, to me, a land use issue that neighbors should be, you know, that's the flip side of what you're talking about there, that we shouldn't be messing with the business code, but at the same time, I see that section is entirely out of skew and should be in the zoning issue. The kennel issue should be in the zoning.
But not, so do you feel like we should bring the short-term rental more into the zoning than what this definition does?
I don't know, I'd have to think about it. I'm just saying that all city codes are improved upon little by little. I'm not saying that we need to fix everything at once, but I'm just making the observation that, if it's a land use issue, then maybe we ought to pull it back in and at least give the neighbors notice and make it a conditional use permit or you know, instead of just saying the city gets $150 and if you know, it's a law enforcement issue.
To your point, maybe, in the use, coming back to the use chart, it does have, when it is in the land use, allowing it and permitting it in certain residential areas would be definitely within the purview of the land use on that. So as far as a permitted use and saying, keeping of dogs, cats, fish, exotic caged birds, becomes, at that point, becomes a land use as far as where in the use that those are allowed. And I think that could at some point be brought up. That's
a good observation.
so, I would encourage, now that we've gone through kind of, just make sure that if there's something that you just scroll down those use ones and say, should this be allowed in here or there? And if you've done that, great. I think proceed on with approval or recommendation. But I think where we're going to really have a land use effect is in this use chart. And if it is one, I'd be cautious of conditional use. When we have conditional uses, it goes through a process, but we can only set the condition that's outlined in the code. So it's a permitted use with the possibility of setting conditions. So if it shows condition, you want to be careful with those because they're not a conditional use to deny, it's a conditional use to add conditions, but permitted with conditions. And that's where a lot of people get into, a lot of cities get into some problems because they think that's a vote of for or against the use. But you'll see permitted, and you'll see where it might be.
That's incidental in the commercial highway, if it's a non-sales tax producing business. Yeah.
It's like, but so it'll show permitted, conditional, and if it doesn't show, then it is prohibited.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to give you that idea. But if there's any of those that you say, especially the ones that we're changing, I'd really like to make sure that if there's some that we're changing and you say, oh no, that shouldn't be allowed in my neighborhood, or that's not a commercial thing, whatever that may be. I don't mean to lead you there. But we're adding LCR because we haven't had LCR, so that's all kind of new in the use chart. And
That's a public. It's like
public district,
yeah, public district. It's like a PUD. It is a PUD. It's just kind of on a grander scale.
in commercial side. So anyway, at that point, those ones have been added as districts and zoning districts, but we haven't updated use chart, and so that's why those are all new, because the district was created and then the use chart hadn't been updated to reflect if that's allowed. So anyway, if you're good with what's there, that's great. I just want to make sure that you've made sure that this is really good purview. We've spent a lot of time in the definitions, but I think this spot right here is very helpful to your land use, and especially the Joe's point.
Well, that's important. And what I'd like to do is, and it's not going to help me because it's a grandfather use one. So I'm not trying to get at my neighbor by doing this. I'm just trying to prevent a problem in the future. I would think and suggest that we add, and I'm looking at page 6 of 6 on the land use chart, where it's got items 2, breeding or raising of animals for sale, food, pleasure, or profit, and 3, keeping of dogs, cat, fish, caged birds. I think you ought to have a kennel in there and make it a non-permitted use in residential zones.
In all residential zones?
Talk to me, I'm open, I'm just
I mean, this one, the breeding of animals, that kind of comes into that kennel permit. I mean, if I have a thoroughbred dog and I breed them and then go to sell them, that's kind of what this will get me, a kennel permit. And so I have that.
No, I don't think you need to, as long as those dogs are underneath 2 months old, they're not considered dogs.
I think your point is if they're going to permanently have more than 3 dogs at their location, then we should put, since we call that a kennel, that's where in a residential area, certain residential areas, that should either not be permitted or be permitted under conditions. That would be,
Yeah, I think it's no problem in an agricultural area.
right.
And if you have a 1 acre or you have a half an acre, you know, that's what I would say on this, that's what I'm trying to get to, apologize, because but breeding or raising is not in our most densely populated area, it's not permitted. But as the population, as that density is less than it is allowed in a 10 acres, so you got a 1/4 acre lot, you can have animals within a 6,000 square foot lot where you're right on top of your neighbor. Yeah, that's not permitted.
Well,
Anyway, that's kind of what I was curious about. If everyone, or if you had certain ones, you know, oh, you can be here, but if I'm in a condo and right on top of my neighbor, I probably don't want the dog barking underneath me every.
I'm on 1/3 of an acre, and it's too close. I mean, I'm not trying to complain about my situation, but it's the only thing I have to relate to personally is the neighbor next door gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning, drives down to the Uinta gravel pit, working for one of the gravel companies. He lets the dogs out to relieve themselves. I understand they can't stay in the house, but at 4 o'clock in the morning, I wake up because I've got 3 dogs barking outside, and it's not pleasant.
He's actually violating the noise ordinance to a degree by doing that. If they're out for I mean, of course, even 5 minutes could wake you up, but if they're out for very long, he is violating the noise ordinance. So there's kind of other codes that we could look at to help with some of that release. Because just because they can pay $150 and have 4 dogs doesn't mean that they get away with not following the cleanliness and the noise and all of that kind of stuff.
Well, they're great about picking up the cleanliness. That's not the problem.
Yeah, it's the noise.
Well, the problem is the noise, and then they have them out in the front yard off a leash, and they come directly from my grandkids. And then when you say something, all hell breaks loose. It makes it very unpleasant in the neighborhood. And, you know, I'm sorry, I don't mean to make it personal, but I just think more than 2 dogs, neighbors ought to know what's going on. And you know, sometimes you can have a small yappy dog. Some of those dogs that were bred in China as guard dogs for noise to make you aware. Those things were intentionally bred for that. They would be more annoying than the big dogs. I'm not saying it's just the size of the dog. These are all bigger than German Shepherds, all 4 of them.
So how about maybe we do that as a discussion item? Actually consider,
Understood, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, let's talk
actually
about
consider
kennels and
kennels
dogs and animals and maybe a little bit about the
and
noise
noise ordinance.
Yeah, that's a good
And we
idea.
could look at what we have, what protections we have, and if there's, if we have stuff and we're not able to enforce it, then we need to maybe look at zoning change to prohibit it in the zone or things like that. So maybe we could put together that as a discussion, a study item.
And let me make it absolutely clear, I'm not trying to get it gone.
No, I know.
Because I understand that it is a grandfathered use that's there.
Right,
So
I
this
get it.
is just to maybe solve someone's problem in the future.
Right, yeah, I get that. But I just think there's kind of a lot of pieces of the puzzle that maybe it warrants its own. But it's up to you guys. I would probably suggest it own discussion, but it's totally up to you guys how you want it.
Is that something we could add to the use chart? You know, maybe another, 2.5 more than 3. And then click only in certain zones or is that just like a totally separate section? Where they pay the 150 and get an additional dog?
Commercial kennels are already prohibited in the animal control. Or maybe it's in the home business ordinance, maybe it's in both. But commercial kennels are prohibited. We do have one, I think, that's still in business. We used to have 4, but I think we only have 1 now. But we still have what we call a kennel license that is for people that want to have more than 3 dogs, then they have to pay that additional fee plus the license fee for all their dogs. And if that's something that we need to consider saying, nope, 3's the limit, then, like Joe says, that would take effect from the point that goes into play. But
Not something we need to add to this use chart.
I think you can.
Yeah.
I think you could, in fact, I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion because I'm not gonna get my feelings hurt. See, but I would make a motion that underneath on page 6, where underneath 2 and 3 on the top of that with R120, R112 and R10, you take out the permitted, make it not permitted, and then we take it as a study item.
on both 2 and 3? Or just 2?
Probably just 3, the keeping of dogs, cats, fish.
You're moving,
I'm trying to get to the kennel issue.
So I have a motion from Joe Chambers to move this use chart to continue it on as a study item, particularly regarding the dog issue. Do I have a second? Do we have further discussion?
Actually, let me clarify.
I wanna clarify.
My motion wasn't to do,
Yeah.
it was
just-
two part. It was number 1, immediately change for item 3, the keeping of dogs. I'm not worried about fish. But dogs and cats. To change the uses underneath R120, R112, and R110 that are currently permitted subject to conforming with the other provisions of chapter 5-1 according to the little carrot items that footnoted there. Just taking the P off of there and not allow it. But I'm not so sure that I mean, you're allowing that in all residential areas.
but this is maybe 1 or 2 dogs and not to the point of kennel.
Maybe we just need to add a 4. That's kennel, not add a 4, renumber, so that we do add another, and it would make sense to add 4, to change 4 to kennel and just move all the others down 1 thing, and then do the not permitted.
Let me withdraw the motion. Let me be more clear. I would move that we insert as a new item for the word kennels, because it's currently defined as 2 or more dogs, more than 2 dogs. I think,
3.
It can be more than 3, but
more than 3,
Mhm.
okay.
But, yeah,
And that we then move 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 down and renumber them consecutively 5 through 11. And not allow kennels in any residential zone. Just agriculture. Not in any residential multiple use, not in any mixed residential commercial, it's not in commercial, not in public recreation.
kennel would only be allowed in agricultural use, what you're proposing.
Correct. Apologize.
Would,
Hey, Ty, you took good notes?
before we go in too much further, would that, I mean, would making a change like that require us to have another hearing?
No.
So public wouldn't have an opportunity to comment on that?
How do you feel about it, Bob?
Well, I have my, my dog groomed.
I have a motion on the table. Do I have a second?
Oh, so we're not gonna,
We'll
we're
do
gonna talk
discussion after
after
the
the,
second.
second, I'll second it, yeah.
Okay. Do we have further discussion?
Yes. So I get my dog groomed by a lady in her home. And, she does, she'll take, dogs to board at her house too. Which I would assume that would require some kind of a kennel. I'm gonna go home and ask her.
Depending on how many she's helping, right?
Yeah, so I, don't know if the neighbors are concerned about that or not. I don't know if it's an issue. I know that,
Well, she should have a home business.
yeah, I think she does, has a home business permit and all that kind of stuff. So, but I don't know if she has a kennel permit. I mean, that's would be required if you're temporarily boarding, taking my dog for the weekend when I'm gone. So anyway, I would like to study it. I don't know that it's the right thing to just make the change and then study it. I'd like to study it and then make a change, make a recommendation for change. And understand a little better what is and isn't allowed in the kennel, in the code for the kennels and that kind of thing. I'm not very familiar with that, and it's probably worth getting to understand it before we change.
Okay, I have a motion and I have a second. We'll go ahead to a vote. All in favor? Aye.
Shelley, you need to tell which alternate is voting.
Oh, yes.
Because Michael never did tune in, did he?
He did
I
not.
do not see him.
Okay. Because one of your alternates would vote, since Michael's not here.
Okay, so that would be Julie.
Cause she was,
First off.
yeah, cause she put in, she was,
Correct. Okay, so glad that is clear. Thank you. Now we are voting on Joe's motion. I'll take a vote again. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries.
Hey, since you have some nays, can you please, for Ty?
Yes.
Say who made and who I, so that he.
Now I had one nay, right?
So,
Yeah, Bob Washburn, nay. Joe Chambers, Julie Martin, Shelley Mazer, and Bob Henke, nay.
And I understand it's a recommendation. I'd also like to make a motion that we put it on the study item and study it so that if we overreacted on it.
Yeah,
we can
sorry,
get it fixed.
just to clarify, I thought we were voting on it being a study item, so that is a nay would be just changing it right now. A yay for putting a study item.
But you're a nay on that motion.
Nay on the motion to just change it without a study.
you still have your beauty passing soon.
So motion, Julie changes the vote to a nay and motion.
So just a clarification, now you have modified the proposal. So instead of, and if your next motion is to take this to a study, it will just continue the items you've talked about and talked about and continued. You'll take all of that to study rather than just the simple one item. Yes.
I'm just interested in the kennel issue. And I'm not just a single issue person. I'm okay with the rest of it.
So that may have been an alternate option versus now you have to have a motion that you change this, but if you had passed this as a recommendation you could then take his as a study item rather than, amendment to this.
I don't wanna do that, right?
You wanna do this one?
I don't wanna let go of this.
Okay.
Because I don't think we'll come back to the kennel issue, and that's, the kennel issue is the only thing that allows me to keep it here. So I
No, I
appreciate,
just wanted to make sure that that was, determined that this is gonna carry forward the total issue with that added as the next
I
issue.
just think, even if we carry it on for 2 weeks, we can talk to our neighbors, get some input, even though the public's not gonna be coming back on it. It, it obviously is not a big issue, for a lot of people that show up on these things, but, and the bottom line is, it's just a recommendation of the city council anyway.
Now, can I, just for clarification, can we go ahead and move the definitions to city council and hold on to the use chart, or would you prefer to keep those together?
I think it's one resolution. I think at this point, they're married. You could separate them, but at this point, they're married. I believe that,
You could separate them if you chose to. You do have, because we have 5 Wednesdays, you will have another meeting before city council meetings. So, and I believe your bylaws say you can bring something back if, we'd have to look. But I guess if at your next meeting after you studied it, if you felt like you wanted to change this, I think you can vote to bring it back. We'll have to read how that goes.
The Roberts Rules of Order required Bob or Julie to make the motion to bring it back, I think.
I think, and it requires that you have at least the same number of people in attendance that voted on it so you had 5 voting, you'd have to have at least 5 people there for the bring back, I believe.
Let's keep it. That'll keep it simple. Right?
and the next one is you don't have, we don't believe you have to take it to a public hearing, but with that enough, is that an interest that you want it to? Because that will vary what our next action is. If not, then it will just come back as a regular agenda item you can action on.
I don't have a problem with it's a public hearing, I would love to have public.
I just kind of pose the question so that we know scheduling wise what you want us to do.
We can put it on as a public hearing, that change.
That would be up to.
Do we need to take a vote on that?
Well, you would move it to a public, move it back to a public hearing or just move it to the agenda. So yeah, you've modified it now. What are you gonna do with this thing? Now it's modified. You can discontinue it now, which doesn't sound like what you wanna do, which is fine. You can move it to another public hearing. You can move it to the next agenda. This way you have an item to do something.
And you'll go ahead and make those changes for the next, discussion.
Do a public hearing further. Since we've got an extra clear.
It's not an extra meeting, it's not extra, it's five of the 5 weeks.
Mine is a 5 weeks, sorry. Right.
So we got 2 weeks.
Yeah, we do have 2 weeks. Sorry,
July.
I had my months wrong.
Okay, let's move on with this item. Do we need to take a vote, on where we would like to take this? Okay, I will entertain a motion.
Before you do that, I know we've been talking about dogs and dog kennels. I want to go back to the short-term thing just for one quick question. In the chart, it's bed and breakfast, residential, short-term rental. And on the definitions, it's just bed and breakfast residential. And I know we've had that discussion before, but how come we don't have short-term rental on the definition?
It's also known as short-term rental.
Line 17. The end of it.
Okay. What?
Would you feel more comfortable if it was just in the title?
I'd feel more comfortable not having bed and breakfast at all, just having short-term rental, because that's what we're talking about, I think.
Yeah, we did have this discussion before, and the code refers to bed and breakfast. So the code, if you're reading the code, and you go to this document to see what that refers to.
All right, I knew we had that discussion before. Okay.
So before we have a motion, can somebody help me understand what it is that we're?
Yes, so we are now going to decide whether we want to, hold on to this item and make it a study item at the next meeting. If we wanna move it back to a public hearing, now that it has the changes. Or if we would like to move it on to.
I'd like to study it, at least, and I think that it's worthwhile having the public have an opportunity to say something. I think public, you know, they only get interested when it affects them, and there's a lot of subjects in this. People look at that and say, yeah, it doesn't affect me until somebody says, Kennel, you got too many dogs and you're in trouble, you know, so I think it's worth talking. I'd like to make sure that, I'm not, supporting something that's causing a problem. You know, it's,
I don't think you would need to have a separate study item. I think you could have your public hearing, because you've studied this quite a bit. And we can have some more information on kennels and stuff, but you can have your public hearing. Talk about it. Put it in another meeting and make your recommendation about it. So I think what you're deciding is whether to take this to a public hearing or whether to just make your recommendation before we're just.
I accept the motion.
I'm accepting motion.
I make the motion that we take this item. But the definitions list as well as the chart and have a public hearing in the next week. And have a vote.
Do I have a second?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Might you like to change some spelling errors
In minutes?
Yes.
in?
In the
Yes.
document.
I can do it, too late.
Future list. But you can do it on the next
Email
one.
Starlist.
Email
Send it to us.
Spelling errors, unless it completely changes the text of the.
She hasn't made spelling errors, so just correct her. and she'll get it corrected.
Yes, email you. Yeah, just email me those grammars.
Thank you. All right, so that wraps up our legislative items. We have no administrative items and no current study items. We do have a note, not on the agenda, but just something that I wanted to speak about. Michael Fortune wanted me to remind you all that at our first July meeting, we will be positions available as the chair and the vice chair. So if you're not gonna be here, you might wanna expect a new title when you get back. But that's something we will be discussing at the first.
Keep in mind, that's a recommending, I believe that's a recommending to the council, and they actually.
Affirm.
So clarify for me, because you were recommended as the vice chair,
I am interim at this time.
interim, and then that's when we put it through. And then
So you make it at the July one, you make it as a recommendation of the council from.
Do we have any other items you would like to discuss?
I'll just say again, I mentioned last time that it's probably worth taking a minute or a few minutes to look at the bylaws. Because the bylaws where it gives us instructions on our job, and then also on the election of chairman and vice chairman. That type of thing. It's, good to be familiar with that.
Bob, did you see anything you'd like to change or update regarding the bylaws? Is that something you think we should bring in front of the commission?
No, I don't know of anything. I think it's just good to be knowledgeable about what the bylaws are.
Thank you for that recommendation. Suggestions, go back and take a look at those. There's lots of good information. Okay, with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
To adjourn the meeting. I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye.